Herodotus, the father of history or lies. They called him the father of history. But others, even in his own time, sneered and whispered another name, the father of lies. The truth is, no one really knew who Herodotus was when he was alive. He was not a king, not a warrior, not even a politician. He was something stranger in a world that worshipped soldiers and statesmen. He was a collector of stories. Born around 484 BCE in Halicarnassus, a Greek city on the coast of Asia Minor, Herodotus grew up in a place where East met West. Persian kings ruled the land, but Greek culture thrived in the streets. As a boy, he would have heard the clash of two worlds in the marketplace, Greek sailors telling tales of distant islands, Persian traders boasting of vast empires, mercenaries carrying scars from battles fought far away. And from a young age, Herodotus listened. He remembered. He asked questions that few dared to ask. By the time he was a man, he had already earned a reputation, restless, curious, sometimes even suspicious. He traveled farther than almost any Greek of his time, to Egypt, where he marveled at the pyramids and asked priests about the age of their gods, to Babylon, where he studied their walls and temples, to Scythia, where he wrote of horsemen who drank the blood of their enemies. Everywhere he went, he recorded, questioned, compared. But here lies the puzzle. Was he writing history, or was he spinning a tale? His great work, the Histories, begins not like a dry chronicle, but like a storyteller before a fire. He doesn't say, "This happened on this date." Instead, he says, "I am writing down these things so that the deeds of men will not be forgotten, nor the great wonders of the world fade with time." It sounds noble, doesn't it? But then he begins. He writes of the Persian wars, how mighty kings like Darius and Xerxes sought to crush Greece. He describes battles, Marathon, Salamis, Thermopylae, in vivid detail. But then, between wars, he slips in strange wonders. Ants the size of foxes digging gold from the sands of India. Flying snakes that guard the frankincense trees of Arabia. One-eyed tribes, and headless men living at the edges of the world. Were these real? Or were they part of something else? That was the question his listeners asked when he recited his work aloud. Because that's how history began, not in books, not in classrooms, but in crowded halls where Herodotus read his words to the people. Some were spellbound. Others laughed, muttering, "This is not history. This is fiction." And yet, despite the doubts, his name spread. He was invited to Athens, the heart of Greek culture, where men like Pericles and Sophocles listened to him. Imagine it. In a city obsessed with glory, war, and democracy, Herodotus stood before them and told them not only what had happened, but why. He searched for causes, for reasons behind human actions. He wasn't just saying, "The Greeks fought the Persians." He was asking, why do men go to war? Why do empires rise, and why do they fall? No one had ever done that before. But here is where his story grows darker. Because Herodotus was not always loved. In Athens, they enjoyed his tales, but in other cities, they called him a liar. In some places, his words were even banned. The Spartans, for example, loathed how he portrayed them. To them, Herodotus was not a historian but a dangerous storyteller, one who revealed too much or twisted the truth. Was he exaggerating? Was he inventing things to fill the gaps? Or was he simply repeating what he had heard, leaving it to his audience to decide? The answer lies somewhere between fact and fiction. Herodotus himself admitted that not everything he wrote was certain. Often, he says, "This is what I was told, but I do not fully believe it." It was as if he wanted to preserve every rumor, every possibility, as though afraid that losing even the strangest tale would erase part of humanity's memory. And perhaps that's the heart of the mystery. Was Herodotus a liar, or was he simply too honest? Because honesty, in his world, didn't mean recording only what was true. It meant recording everything, the truth, the lies, the legends, so that future generations could decide for themselves. As he grew older, his journey slowed, but his writing deepened. He was not just telling of battles and monsters anymore. He was warning of something larger, the endless cycle of hubris and fall. Nations rise to greatness, but pride brings them down. The Persians learned it. The Greeks, he hinted, would one day learn it too. But in leaving behind his words, Herodotus also left behind a curse, the curse of doubt. Was he the first historian, the one who showed the world how to record the past? Or was he the first deceiver, wrapping fiction in the clothing of truth? Even now, centuries later, we can't answer. We only know that without Herodotus, there may have been no Thucydides, no Plutarch, no history at all. Yet without his embellishments, his myths, his strangeness, would we still remember him? Perhaps that was his secret all along. He did not want to be believed. He wanted to be remembered. And so, as the old man of Halicarnassus set down the last lines of his histories, he was already caught between two worlds, one that saw him as a genius and one that saw him as a fraud. The question remains, who was Herodotus really? The man who gave us the past, or the man who invented it? To understand Herodotus, we have to walk with him. Imagine him not as a dusty scholar locked in a room, but as a restless traveler, his cloak stained with the dirt of foreign roads, his eyes alive with curiosity. He was not content with sitting in Athens, copying old records. He went out into the world. He wandered Egypt, where he gazed at the Great Pyramid of Khufu. Local priests told him it took 100,000 men and 20 years to build. Herodotus repeated it in his histories. Was it exact? Probably not. But imagine standing before a structure older than memory itself, hearing whispers of kings and gods. Would you not write it down? In Babylon, he measured the massive city walls, claiming they were so wide that a four-horse chariot could ride upon them side by side. Historians today doubt his figures, but his awe was real. He wanted his readers to see what he had seen, to feel that they were standing there beside him. And then there was Scythia, the wild lands north of the Black Sea. Herodotus described the nomads who rode across endless grasslands, their lives bound to their horses. He wrote of warriors who smoked hemp in ritual tents, of tribes who drank the blood of their enemies to seal oaths. To the Greeks, these tales were almost unthinkable. Yet Herodotus carried them home, refusing to let such worlds vanish into silence. But this is where his genius and his danger meet. For alongside facts, he also carried rumors. He told of ants the size of dogs in India that dug gold from the earth. He told of a desert in Arabia where winged snakes guarded the trees that produced precious frankincense. He told of men with faces in their chests, and of tribes that lived without heads at all. Did he believe these things? Perhaps not. Often, Herodotus admitted, "This is what I was told, but I cannot say if it is true." Yet he recorded them anyway, and in doing so, he blurred the line between history and myth. The Greeks were divided. Some adored him. His readings in Athens were like theater. Crowds gathered. People applauded. He was given gold by the Athenians for his work. They admired his courage in asking not just what happened, but why. Why did Xerxes march against Greece? Why did mighty empires crumble? Why do humans repeat their mistakes? But others hated him. The Spartans especially despised how he described them, not as flawless warriors, but as men capable of cruelty and arrogance. To the proud Spartans, his words were an insult. And so, in city after city, he carried a double reputation, beloved storyteller or dangerous liar. Let's pause here. Think of the time he lived in. There were no archives, no national libraries, no official records that could be checked. Stories were passed from mouth to mouth. Battles were remembered differently by every survivor. Priests told tales to honor their gods. Merchants exaggerated to sell their goods. Herodotus was stepping into a storm of voices and trying to write them all down. Is it any wonder that truth and rumor became tangled? But there was more. Beneath the travel, beneath the stories of monsters and marvels, Herodotus had a purpose. His histories were not just about battles. They were about hubris, pride that destroys. He told of Croesus, the rich king of Lydia, who thought his gold would last forever, until the Persians crushed him. He told of Xerxes, who built a bridge of ships across the sea to invade Greece, only to see his fleet destroyed by storms. Again and again, Herodotus returned to one lesson. When men grow too proud, the gods strike them down. It was not just a warning to Persians. It was a warning to Athens itself. For Herodotus had seen Athens rising, powerful, confident, building an empire of its own. And he knew the cycle always repeats. But here's the question, was he really warning them or mocking them? The Athenians loved him when he entertained them. But whispers grew. Herodotus is not on our side. He reminds us too much of our flaws. He shows us as arrogant. He is no patriot. And so, like a wanderer who belonged everywhere and nowhere, Herodotus never truly had a home. When he died, around 425 BCE, likely in Thurii, a colony in southern Italy, his reputation was already torn in two. Some called him the greatest historian who ever lived. Others spat upon his name. Even centuries later, the debate continued. Plutarch wrote an entire essay titled On the Malice of Herodotus, accusing him of slandering Greece, exaggerating, and filling history with lies. And yet, his book survived. Generation after generation copied it. Scholars studied it. Soldiers read it. Kings listened to it. Even as they mocked him, they could not forget him. Why? Because Herodotus had captured something deeper than facts. He had captured the human story. Not just who won or who lost, but why they fought, what they feared, what they dreamed. Maybe that's why his enemies hated him most of all. He showed them not as gods of history, but as men. And that leads us to the final question. If Herodotus is remembered as the father of history, does it matter that some of his stories were false? Or was that part of his plan all along? Picture a firelit room. Scrolls spread across a wooden table. A group of young men sit in silence while one of them reads aloud from a great roll of parchment. The voice trembles with excitement as it tells of Thermopylae, of 300 Spartans holding a narrow pass against a vast Persian army. The story is rich with detail, arrows blotting out the sun, warriors fighting until their last breath. That scene could have happened anywhere in Greece, even 100 years after the battle. For what they were reading was the work of Herodotus. And here is the truth. Whether his words were fact or exaggeration, they gave shape to memory. He made heroes out of men who might otherwise have been forgotten. He made enemies larger than life. He turned events into legends. And legends often last longer than truth. But we cannot ignore the question that haunted him. Was he a historian or a liar? Take the Battle of Marathon. Herodotus claimed the Persians lost 6,400 men, while the Athenians lost only 192. Modern historians doubt such precision. Was he guessing? Was he echoing Athenian propaganda? Or did he really have sources we no longer know? Or consider his claim that Egyptian priests told him their civilization was already 11,000 years old. That would push Egypt's origins far beyond what we now accept. Did Herodotus believe it, or was he simply repeating a tale that impressed him? And yet, there's another way to see it. Perhaps Herodotus never wanted to give us dry numbers. Perhaps he wanted to give us something greater than statistics. Listen to how he writes about war. He does not only count soldiers. He tells of how men felt when they faced the impossible. He tells of strange omens before battles, of kings who dreamed of disaster, of generals who doubted themselves. He paints history not as a record, but as a drama. That was new. That was radical. Before Herodotus, Greeks sang epics like Homer's Iliad. Those were poems, not histories. Kings were demigods. Wars were decided by Zeus and Apollo. But Herodotus tried something else. He said, I will tell what men did. I will ask why they did it. I will search for reasons. This is why Cicero, centuries later, called him the father of history. And yet others, like Plutarch, called him the father of lies. So which is it? Let's step back. Imagine the world as Herodotus saw it. Travel was slow. Languages were barriers. No photographs. No newspapers. If you heard of a war in Persia or a temple in Egypt, you had only one choice. Trust the stories told by those who had been there. Herodotus was not lying, not in the way we think today. He was preserving memory the only way possible, by stitching together truth, rumor, and myth. And maybe he knew something we often forget. Sometimes myths tell us truths that facts cannot. The tale of gold-digging ants in India may sound absurd. But some scholars think it was a confused description of large marmots, whose digging unearthed gold dust. The ants were not real, but the story pointed to something real hidden behind the words. The winged serpents of Arabia? Perhaps just exaggerated accounts of flying reptiles or swarms of locusts. Again, the image was wild, but the core may have been true. In this way, Herodotus was less a liar and more a mirror. He reflected the world as it was told to him, strange, colorful, contradictory. And his influence did not end with him. Every historian after him, Thucydides, Polybius, Tacitus, stood in his shadow. Some wrote with more discipline, cutting away myths, focusing only on politics and war. But none could match the life that Herodotus gave to his pages. Even today, when we read his histories, we feel his curiosity. We walk with him through foreign markets. We listen to priests in their temples. We see the sweat of soldiers in battle. And we hear the laughter of crowds when he tells a story too strange to believe. That is why his work survived, while so many others were lost. So what is the answer? Was he the father of history or the father of lies? The truth may be both. He was a man of his time, writing in a world without clear lines between fact and story. To demand modern accuracy from him is unfair. To dismiss him as a liar is ungrateful. Without him, we would know far less about the world of the ancient Greeks and their enemies. In the end, perhaps Herodotus himself gave us the best answer. Again and again in his histories, after telling some bizarre tale, he wrote, "I am bound to report what I have been told, but I am not bound to believe it." That single line captures his genius. He was a collector of voices, a preserver of memory, a man who refused to let stories vanish, even if they were unbelievable. So when you hear the name Herodotus, do not ask only, was he telling the truth? Ask instead, what truth was hidden inside his stories? Because sometimes, the greatest lies reveal the deepest truths.